You're now live.
Okay. Brothers and sisters, we have a tremendous program for you today. One, I've been waiting for about a month. I've been in contact with Joy, and we set this up so that we have an opportunity to bring to the world uh, a storyteller, a scholar, a master teacher, a world traveler, and an educator, an architect. She was born, this is Joye Hardiman, was born in Buffalo, New York. Um, and she was introduced to the art, crafts, and storytelling at an early age by her parents. And she's with us today. And without any further ado, I want to bring to you Sister Joye Hardiman. Sister Joy, please.
Ah, thank you, Minister Brown, for the invitation to join you today and to be with your audience to um, uh, share my new book that I just published and released on June 20th, the summer solstice. And I am just delighted to be here with you.
Thank you so much. I want to add that we have joining us two special guests who I'm delighted to have. One is Jumbi. Um, I always get you, I just call her Sister Ashe. And Sister Brittany. Is that the way you pronounce that, Sister Brittany? Sister Brittany. So there we go. And we're glad to have you. So we're going to get right back to Sister Joy. Sister Joy, would you please continue? We're just dying to hear your presentation.
Okay, all right. So we'll do the presentation and then we'll have dialogue after.
Yeah, we have questions after, but we're not going to interrupt you during your presentation.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. Let's hit it and put the PowerPoint on on full blast and we'll start.
Okay, Randy. Thank you.
Okay, so I just need the PowerPoint. There we go. Okay. All right. So I am really pleased today to be here at the TransAtlantic Productions and to present to you my new book, The Resurrection of Truth from the Chains of Falsehood. But before I do, it is customary in any kind of gathering of African people that we begin with an libation. And so I just want to pour some water on the ground in honor of all of those ancestors who came before us, who stand beside us, and who are waiting for us in the future. And to the spirit of all of those ancestors, the spirit of all of those storytellers, to the spirit of all those resistors who fought cultural amnesia to tell the story of the glory of African people, we say Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. All right. Thank you. All right. Now we can go back to the slide. And I will go back to mine. Okay. Okay. Change slide. I have been a practitioner of using ancestral wisdom in the service of Black mental, physical, and spiritual health for over four decades. I have been both intrigued and blessed by my research in the use of ancient wisdom for contemporary solutions. And so I'm both a scholar and a practitioner, operating within the African dynamic of both and, as opposed to either or. I taught autobiographical. My PhD is in ancient Egyptian in ancient Egyptian literary studies and urban education. Even at the very beginning, I just wanted to get the knowledge and give it to my people. And so what my dissertation was on ancient Egyptian autobiographical literature and its pedagogical value to urban adult learners. Because what I found after studying the great literature of our ancestors is that we had a totally different worldview than the dominant worldview right now, than the European worldview. We had a worldview that was not mirrored in sin and guilt and shame and blame, but we had a worldview that was nested in lessons learned and wisdom earned from the hills and valleys of one's life. So in the autobiographies, in the stelis around the Nile, you don't see stories of pain and anguish. You see autobiographies that promote good character, that promote good public work, that promote following the rules of Mayat. And so all of these things are very different. So what happened was when I had my students write autobiographies from an ancient Egyptian perspective, they didn't get hung up in what they shoulda, coulda, did what was the major point was, what did you learn? What wisdom did you earn by your life's experience? Yes, you may have had a horrible childhood. I had one student who had been abused by a family member, and nobody had listened to her. But when she wrote her autobiography from the ancient Egyptian perspective, she realized one of the reasons she was such an excellent social worker is because she had good listening skills, because she knew how to listen because no one had listened to her. And so she was able to take a negative experience and flip it and make it into a positive experience for all of the people that she came in contact. So she truly was a victor and not a victim. And I have many stories of people who've gone through that process. But I just wanted to introduce that to you as a way of thinking about how we can incorporate the wisdom of our ancestors into developing more comprehensive, more positive, more loving notions of ourselves. Next slide, please. I also designed an urban campus for adult Black learners, modeled on the Temple Library University of ancient Kemet, one that institutionalized, and that should be HBCU, HBCU values and rituals and best practices. And what that was is, next slide. All right, you can see on this slide that this book that I used is kind of a blueprint to design the campus. The campus is the picture above, and that is the blueprint of constructing learning institutions that were not just for the liberal arts, as the Western society called it, but for the liberating arts, as our people saw it. The purpose of education was to liberate us, to move one from their lower nature to their higher nature. And so when they built the temples of Luxor, they built them modeled anthropomorphically. They built them modeled on the human body and the human spirit. And so what would happen is that and so when I designed the campus above, I made it so that when you came into the doorway to that little space right there, that was kind of like coming into the womb. And we made sure that the colors were earth colors with blue lapis so that you could feel your soul exhale when you walked into the room. And then on the bottom part of the college were the classrooms. And that's where the people kind of gathered and they got their information, and then they moved through the hallway up into the middle to the stomach, to the heart, to the gut. And that was the courtyard in ancient Kemet where people gathered to hear and participate in rituals and ceremonies. And on my campus, it became the Lyceum, the great hall, where we all sat and heard great speakers and discussed great ideas. And as you study more and more, you kind of ascend, you kind of moved up the chakras, or you moved through the building. So finally the stage, we had a beautiful stage at the end of the building with a Sankofa, stained glass Sankofa, gracing that stage. And that became the Holy of Holies, where one went to graduate. So that one worked themselves up, came in through the stomach, went down to the feet and learned some things, moved up and shared that knowledge with the community and studied more and more and more, and finally could graduate. When we designed this campus based on the Temple Library Universities, we also wanted it to be a teaching tool both inside and out. So we wrote a grant, and we had Indabelly artists come from South Africa to help us document the history of the community on the building. Because again, we were working with the ancient Egyptian creative mandate to restore that which is in ruin and make it more beautiful than before. And our community had been called blighted. Our community had become, in the hilltop of Tacoma, was considered the infested place, the blighted place. And that was not true. That was a lie. It was a community of Black folks who had come together for decades and had families and had barbecues and had built businesses along the way. And so we wanted to tell that story. So we got the Indabelly to paint on our building symbols from each of the various community members and community organizations, so we can show the magnitude, the brilliance of Black folk. Can you play that little, hit that little video, please? No, go back. We want to go back. Okay, yes, that one. Right there. Yes, thank you. It has sound, but you can't hear it, I guess. But anyway, this was an animation created celebrating the Indabelly coming to Tacoma. That our students made and designed. They not only did the research, they not only found ways of re-imaging the community, but when the Indabelly came all the way from South Africa to Tacoma, Washington, they were prepared to meet them, to greet them, and to host them. So the Indabelly came to the Evergreen State College Tacoma campus, to our bare walls, and our community that had been misrepresented. And they transformed and turned negatives into positives and created a declaration of community wholeness, community wellness. Now, just recently, in continuing this work of using ancient wisdoms for contemporary times, the ancestors blessed me with being the caretaker of a story. And this story of the Ra-Surrection of truth from the chains of falsehood is a very, very, very old story. In fact, it's a story that comes in many different forms during the high periods of Kemetic culture. We first hear the story of the conflict between good and evil and chaos and Mayat in the story of Osar and Set and Set and Heru. And then we hear the story again in the story of the tale of the two brothers who are fighting over a misinterpretation, and then we hear the story again when we look throughout the annals of Kemetic literature. And so I was blessed with this story, and so I'm going to kind of share a little bit of it with you. and then share with you some things I learned, and then we can go into dialogue. Okay, so next slide. Okay. Okay. Before once upon a time, there was the first time. And during the first time, which was called Satepi, Mayat governed the world. When Mayat governed the world, there was balance, there was harmony, there was justice, there was reciprocity, there was love, there was peace, there was prosperity and abundance throughout when Mayat ruled the world. Next slide. When Mayat ruled the world, okay, next slide. There we go. When Mayat ruled the world, truth walked freely throughout the land. People knew there was no separation between the spiritual and the material, and that what was above was also below. They saw things as wholes rather than as parts. They understood that life was not linear but cyclic, and that what goes around comes around. They understood that redemption was always possible, and that human beings were verbs and not nouns. When the truth walked the world, truth and falsehood were seen as two sides of the same coin. And next slide. They were complementary dualities that lived in yin-yang harmony. When truth walked the world, people were not victims. Each one in their own way was a victor. Everybody was somebody's brother, sister, daughter, son, mother, father, or friend journeying home. This is how it was in the first times when truth walked the world. Next slide. But truth had a brother named falsehood, and falsehood over time grew very resentful of truth. Falsehood did not want to share. Falsehood wanted all the attention, all the admiration, all the praise, and all the power. So falsehood thought and thought and thought and thought and thought, and finally decided that there was only one way to gain world dominance, and that was to destroy truth. Next slide. So falsehood hid behind a tree and waited impatiently to ambush truth, and waited and waited and waited and waited. Next slide. When truth finally walked by, falsehood grabbed truth, chained truth's hands, threw truth to the ground, stepped on truth's throat, muzzled truth's mouth, and kicked truth into a deep, deep, deep pit. Next slide. Then falsehood put on truth's clothes and boldly walked through the land, masquerading as truth. Next slide. The earth shuddered in horror. Everything turned upside down. It became a time of isfit. It became a time of chaos. It became a time when falsehood was ruled the world. Next slide. Falsehood followers put on battle gear and came to conquer. They used language as a weapon. They problematized the other, and they created binary hierarchies. They divided the world into either or and small, lonely places in between. Both and was replaced by black, white, us, them, rich, poor, straight, gay, old, young, fat, thin, ugly, pretty, Christian, heathen, European descendant, other kind of descendant, able, not able, dark skin, light skin, worthy, unworthy, loved, hated, wanted, or rejected. Next page. People began to lock their doors so that the other couldn't get in. And as they locked their doors, they locked their hearts. And as they locked their hearts, they locked their minds. And as they locked their minds, they lost their souls. Fear and anger became dominant modalities. Pathology became a descriptor. Trauma became generational. Money became God. White became right. Terror ruled the land. And the big lie was spoken by all. Next slide. But there are always resistors. There are always those who know in their hearts and souls that the universe is upside down and that things were out of balance. There will always be those who know that something is terribly wrong, and it is not in their nature for them to walk around with their heads bent down, backs bent, eyes to the ground. So they fought cultural amnesia and focused on liberation. They called out to the ancestors. They prayed for guidance and intervention and direction, and the ancestors responded. Now I'm going to stop there because that's about halfway through the book. But the rest of the first part becomes this story, and the second part is like a manual that basically tells us not only how to bring truth back into the world, but how to maintain it. It talks about how the ancestors have left us steps and wisdoms along the way in order to walk in truth. It goes into talking about the 10 Egyptian virtues that our ancestors gave to us as a way of knowing how to build our character and our direction. Those virtues were things like the controlling of thought and the controlling of action and steadfastness and identity with a higher ideal and evidence of a mission and freedom from resentment and call for a spiritual order and confidence in a teacher being able to teach and in confidence in one's being able to learn and go through initiation. So it lays out those virtues as stepping stones that we can use in order to bring truth back into our life and into the world. And the book goes on to say is that the only way to access truth is not externally, but internally. That what has to happen is that people have to go inside, the book says, and look at those falsehoods, look at all those false narratives that falsehood would like us to believe, and to get out those negative narratives and the negative thoughts, and to see ourselves as whole and complete. And once we see ourselves as whole and complete, then we can join with others who have also been on that same spiritual journey. And then together we can go down deep, 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 deep and pull falsehood up. And then the book goes on to talk about other kind of strategies that we can use to maintain falsehood, because the book says very clearly, you can never eradicate falsehood. Falsehood will always be here. Falsehood will always be trying to throw in the monkey wrench, always trying to make us be less. And so the book goes on to talk about how we have to fight against that, and mainly how that this is a generational battle. And so it's really important that we instill in our own this love, this fervor, this passion for Blackness, so that we can do as Queen Hatshepsut says, restore that which is in ruin and make it more beautiful than before. So that's kind of like how the book goes. Now, let me just kind of tell you a couple little things, because the ancestors are marvelous, and life is reciprocal. And so there were many gifts that I received by doing this book and taking this on. And one of them was to realize with all the certainty in my heart that this book taught me that the ancestors are here with us. The ancestors are around us, and they've left the signs and symbols and principles and values to guide our way. As we go through this darkness, they have given us pieces of light along the way. Can we go back to the PowerPoint for just 1 second, please? Yeah, because and that's what I found. I found all these amazing symbols, and I thought of this movie that I had seen called The Brother from Another Planet, and yeah, here we go. Go to the slide, right, the one right after that one, please. Next slide, the one that has the black screen in the middle of it. Yeah, the next one after that. Yeah. Okay, great. Our ancestors, the biggest lesson I find is our ancestors left us symbols and signs to show us a way home. Just like this scene from The Brother from Another Planet, when he gets captured by these slave catchers and they're about to drag him away. But he starts looking on the walls, he starts looking at the graffiti, and all of a sudden he knows how to come home. Can we play that? And it probably won't have sound either, but you can get the idea of it. So there he is, and there are the signs. He's looking at the graffiti, and he's looking at it on the walls, and he's saying, oh, what is the graffiti saying? Oh, all right, the graffiti is saying, be free, be free, be free, be free, be free. So he breaks the chains, he pulls out the plugs, he pulls out the seasoning device, and he escapes, and he starts to run. And they run after him. But he's got the signs. The ancestors are there. The ancestors are saying, come this way, this way, this way. And he runs and he runs and he follows the ways of the ancestors, and the slave catchers are after him, just on his heels. And then he reconnects. He reconnects with the resistors. He reconnects with the ancestors. He has followed the signs. He has come home. And the slave catchers have to flee because darkness can never exist in the face of light. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to leave with like three symbols that our ancestors left us, that I discovered by doing this work, this reclamation work. And of course, the symbol of the Sankofa. Everyone knows that symbol. The idea of going back and fetching, going back in our history. That's the mandate. If we want to move forward as African people, we've got to know our history. We've got to know our history, and not just knowing our history from our head, but knowing our history from our heart. And that's why the secondary symbol of the Sankofa is a heart symbol, because it's heart knowledge is what we're seeking. Heart knowledge is what's going to make us free. Heart knowledge will help us with deprogramming ourselves. And this symbol was not just found in Ghana, as we know it, but Tony Broder found this heart symbol in the pyramids of the Sudan, in Nubia. And so the symbol is over, it goes back into antiquity as well as into traditional modern Ghana. And this symbol was taken and was brought across the ocean by the iron workers who the blacksmiths who were captured and enslaved and taken because their skill was so high. that they would produce a great price at the marketplace. But even though they were sold, they still remembered who they were, and so they carved the Sankofa in the ironworks of Charlotte and New Orleans, so people could not forget. Even in Brazil, when I was in Brazil, I saw the Sankofa symbol on the gateway that surrounded the shrine of Anastasia, the Black Saint of Brazil, who refused to be enslaved, who they put a muzzle on her mouth, because every time they would take it off, she would urge revolution. She would urge people to run to the hills to escape to freedom, and if they couldn't, to stay where they are and kill as many people who were oppressing them on the ground right there at that moment. And around her, and she is considered the saint of the oppressed, around her is the Sankofa, protecting her. When I went to, again in Brazil, when I went to the Institute for the Protection of the Unvalued, which was like a place where once you were freed, you could go and you could get, it was like a social service operation. But at the social service operation, the Sankofa was there. The Sankofa was there protecting and anointing the people. And so, and then there was a second symbol that really struck me so much by doing this work, and that is the symbol of Heka. All right. And if I like the way you're jumping back between me and the slides, because that's really good. Thank you so very much. But now I got to go back to the slides again, just because I want to show them Heka. Heka are two hands that are like this, and the hands of a Ka symbol. So Heka is the, according to Jake Carruthers, is the evocative power of language to accomplish what one wills. The ancestors, yes, that's it, Heka. The ancestors wanted us to know that we had that power. And you can see the Heka symbol all over. You can see it at church when we go and we praise the Lord. We praise the Lord and we evoke. We say we want a better day coming now. You can see the Heka symbol when we go to parties and we say we're going to raise the roof. You know, I was just watching Janelle Monáe's song, we say the name song, what the hell you talking about song, and at the end, after they say all the names of the Black people who have been murdered by the police, they all raise their hands like this, like the Heka sign, and they all march out in the Heka sign. The Heka sign is with us all the places. Go to look at the dances of Shango. Shango always goes to Heka. All right, now the last slide. I'm sorry, I'm going to go really, so you, and after this one, you won't have to jump back and forth. And not only do we have Heka, the ancestors left us, but we have Kepper, we have the dung beetle, we have the symbol, the scarab, the symbol of creativity, the symbol of what, as Black people, it should be very clear what our purpose is. Our purpose is to restore that which is in ruin and make it more beautiful than before. That's what the dung beetle does. That's what the scarab does. Okay, now you can go back to me. And the scarab, I mean, because what the scarab does is it lays its eggs in myrrh, in dung. And so it takes this dung that we go, ugh, and it sure makes it a creative bed for its young. And its young give a rise from the dung. And that goes back to the principle of Black folks that we know so well, is how to make lemonade out of lemons. How we have a whole culture that's based on piecing and quilting and taking pieces of overalls that are all broken up and cutting them into pieces and making quilts to make people warm. We have quilted, we have salvaged. That is our destiny and our nature and our strength. And the ancestors left us those. They left us all these symbols so that we could find a way home. So that's kind of, I want to stop there in terms of the presentation, because I think that's a lot of stuff I just kind of talked about. But but it has been a pleasure doing this book. I have learned so much. Oh, and just one other thing about how the concept of the dung beetle is not just in Kemet, not just in Africa, not just in the USA, but one of the leading members of the Quilombo community in Brazil, who was able to resist the Portuguese for over 20 years, called himself the Black Dung Beetle. Right? He took that. He took that from Africa and made that his mantra as he preserved a whole community in the hills of Brazil. So, all right. So, yeah, I could go on, but I'm going to stop.
Okay. If there are any questions, now you can ask those questions. By the way, thank you, Sister Joy. That was absolutely marvelous and true and
Oh,
full of wisdom, insight, and depth. That raises our consciousness because we are at war between good and evil, but it is our time. And so I just thank you. Any questions? Yes. Okay, my sister, you had a question, Sister Brittany.
I did not have. I didn't have a
I'm
question.
sorry.
I was shaking my head in agreement. I think Dr. Joy is a phenomenal storyteller. So I was waiting for everyone else to ask questions.
So Brittany, what struck you out of it? What seemed to resonate in terms of some truth that you have been holding or thinking about?
I definitely think that you're likening the good and the bad and the truth and the falsehood. There will always be falsehood around, but it is up to those who are the keepers of truth and the those who know the truth to perpetuate it and tell it and not fall prey to falsehoods and inaccuracies and perpetuate them. And I think that's where we are. The story is always going to be the same. It is an ancient story, and it's current, and it's exactly what we're experiencing now: misinformation, disinformation, and so it's really important for those who know truth to really share it and make sure that there's correction and gentle correction to bring balance.
Yes, excellent insight. Yes, indeed.
Sister Mjubi.
Yes. First of all, let me just give thanks to the ancestors, the divine feminine cosmic womb of the universe, to bring forth Mama Joy, because I'm just smiling from ear to ear. My cheeks are sore. I mean, because I'm hearing so much confirmation, and I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to speak to you one on one. But the one question I have for now is, so you're a storyteller. That means the one of the spiritual divine gifts that the ancestors awakened in you is kind of like what the ancestors awakened in me, agree at, where we're actually, so can you explain a little bit more in reference to us the understanding that the resurrection is actually within us, and we are the vessels that they're going to be using for this divine purpose of awakening and reestablishing? Thank you, Mama.
Thank you, Mama, as well. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and for asking that question, and thank you for the work that you do. I see you have the instrument in your hand, and so even though it is just a picture, I can still feel the sound vibrations coming from your spirit when I hear your voice. So it is nice to make the contact. Yeah. One of the things that that if you notice in my title of my book, it's called The Ra-Surrection of Truth. Not the not the resurrection, but the Ra-Surrection. And what I was trying to imply and get people to understand is that because we are, as many people have said, divine beings having a human experience, and because our ancestors knew that, and that's why they built the temples based on the anatomy, on the human anatomy, because they wanted people to understand that the temple outside is the same thing as the temple inside. Then what I try to do is play with language and get it so that we stop thinking of returning, which means re is the Latin prefix for me coming back to the same place. All right, and we stop thinking of regaining, because that means just gaining what we had at the beginning. But we think about raw gaining, which means gaining our divine being, making that connection with the sun, making that connection with the daily rotation of the sun that starts out as Kepler at the beginning, at the sunrise. That every day we see is a new beginning to empower us. That goes on to being full-fledged Ra at our points of power, and then into renew, going back to the atom, going back to Ra. And if we understand that connection that we have with the cosmic, then we understand how the power of our own divinity. And so I say, I want to Ra-surrect. I want to resurrect us in our divine image. I want to Ra-claim our history for Black people. I don't want it to be this little repeat of the lies that they have told, but to be an ascension to the truth. And so I think that just by looking at our language and looking at how our language has a tendency to diminish us, our language has a tendency to objectify us, so that we are locked into just the physical plane, and not being aware of all the different planes we exist on at the same time. And so once we do that, because Western society is only about parts and taking things apart, and so it has splintered our relationship with nature. It has splintered our relationship with the divine. And if we can Ra pair them, all right, Ra pair them back in the name of Ra, not pair them back in the name of dimensionality or craziness, but in terms of ascension, then we can move forward in the grace and blessings of our divine beings, which and no matter what they've done throughout history, they have tried to make us less divine. They have tried to reduce us. And throughout our history, we have demanded our humanity. We have, even if you look, I mean, I have a background, besides having a background in ancient Egyptian literature, where I started all this, is I had a background in Western classical literature, the Greeks, the Shakespeare, because that's all I knew. When I was going to school, when they said great literature, they certainly weren't talking about the Osirian drama. They certainly weren't talking about the Memphite theology. They were talking about, Chaucer and Shakespeare and all those people and stuff like that. But there's a whole tradition in Western classical literature of Black folk demanding humanity, and divinity, not just for themselves, but for the world. For example, Aesop. Aesop was an African. His name was really Aesop Africanus. All right, and he was an African. Some people say he might even have been a Twa. But he basically, at a time when the Greeks were going around being really freaky and doing all these other kind of Greeky things, he came up with fables and talked and told the little man not to despair. That sometimes being all huff and gruff is not going to get you across the finish line first. And so he spoke to the humanity of the world. And then you move in and you go to Rome, and they don't tell you that Terence, the father of comedy, was African, because he couldn't stand all that tragedy. As Che Ante Diop says, tragedy is a Western invention. We never had, that was not part of our mindset, because it couldn't be, because we saw the Nile graciously flow every year. We didn't see tragedy. Sometimes the Nile was a little kinky and it didn't flow as much, but basically it was pretty regular and pretty predictable and pretty fertile. And so we didn't see life as tragic. The Greeks saw tragedy because they lived in the mountains and they were always fighting each other. And so life, of course, would be tragedy. But we would never buy into that. So the father of Roman comedy happened to be an African who said, y'all need to laugh at yourself, because this is what's going on is a little bit on the crazy side. And then we go to France and we get Alexander Dumas, both Pierre and Fille, who wrote about the man in the iron mask, who wrote about fraternity, about three brothers, the three musketeers, about how we had to come together. Again, these are signposts that the ancestors are leaving. And then we get to Pushkin, we get to Pushkin in Russia, and he writes in terms of the people, and how to democratize that. And then we get Langston Hughes and we get Zora Neale Hurston. Throughout history, Black folk, throughout history, even Western history, Black folks have been standing up for humanity. Black folks have been standing up for their vision. And I see my brother Reggie. Hey, Reggie. Hey. Oh, now this man is a scholar. I have to give him a shout out, because he is not only a scholar, but he is a warrior, and he is a door opener. And a lot of times we get into situations where we get into a position and we don't let anybody else in. But when Reggie was working at the Schoenberg, one of the first things he did was invite me to do a panel with Dr. Milana Karanga at the Schoenberg. And it was my first kind of like coming out party, because I had just been working as a little scholar all myself here in the Pacific Northwest, so far away from everybody. And Reggie said, "Hey, I like your scholarship. I let me support you." And so I want to give him a shout out, because he's a brother who exalts the mother spirit, who is not so afraid of his being that he won't share his stage with a woman. And that's not always the case. So I just want to give a shout out to that to Reggie, because he's my friend.
Can I add? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Hotep,
Hotep.
Mother Joye Hardiman. It is always a pleasure to hear you speak, and I know what it is to be a scholar out and far away from how can I say, the masses sometimes, and sometimes from the scholars. And so it's always been a pleasure to work with you and Sister Latrella, and so many of the great women, Dr. Rosalind Jeffries, Dr. Riketti Amen, because I always promote the women in my work. And I have a few comments that are educational to help people. Dr. Joye Hardiman is pulling from what Dr. Jacob Carruthers calls the deep well of African thought, the deep, deep well. And so um, it takes scholarship, it takes hard work to really understand some of the concepts. One of the things she showed is the Temple of Man, and but people do not understand that it was never the Temple of Man. It was always the Temple of Women. How do we know this? We know this because all temples in Kemet have the feminine T. So the temple word itself is Hawat, right? HW period T, and even the Ipit Asut, right, which is Karnak, right, is with the feminine T. So we know that all humans are born within a womb, and that womb is the temple. I'd like to add some other things. She talked about George G.M. James's 10 virtues. Uh, George Jim James, a teacher of Dr. Ben, and one of our great teachers who created the Stolen Legacy. Um, uh, Clemson says get a headset, so I'm echoing back. Uh, uh, but the the concepts that she talked about of the 10 virtues, Dr. Yosef Benjo Cannon asked us to find it in the Nile Valley, find those words. And so part of my work has always been to listen to my elders and to find those words. So Sia is control of thought. Heka is control of action, effective action. Who is divine purpose? Sia Heka Hu, right? Control of thought, control of action, steadfast of purpose, identity with higher ideas. That is mind itself. Divine purpose is to be the Jeru Ma, and Dr. Malana Karanga talks about that. Um, Call to a spiritual order, that is Sa. Uh, uh, Faith in a teacher, that's the Sabat, the Sabbat, right? Facing your own learning abilities, that's perception, that is Ma. Uh, 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 Initiation, the final step, is what the ancient Egyptians called Makeru. So Dr. Joye Hardiman is her work is deeply embedded in Nile Valley language, Nile Valley visualization, and her work in narrating in a story is what the Africans did called narrative art. And the first, I have a presentation that's coming up in ASCAC where we all, she's a board member, and luckily I have her and Sister Latrella that support me, that I'll be able to represent. But the first writing of ancient Egypt was in narrative form, and it's on the vases, and so I'll be presenting that. So I'll stop just to say, continue your work, great Mut that is the Kemetic name. She is pulling from a deep, deep, deep well of African thought, and the Nile Valley made the female the highest deity before the first dynasty. So the highest deity was Bat, Baa period T, which is the soul. And so the ancient Nile Valley Africans gave their concept of the soul to this woman named Bat. And so when Tony Browder shows this symbol that he finds in ancient Egypt, and he connects it to West Africa, scholars like myself do research, and what we have found that is the glyph of the goddess Bat, and it came to West Africa not by ancient Egypt per se, but the civilization that gave birth to ancient Egypt, which is Nakada. So Bat is in the Green Sahara, and when the Sahara dries up, the same Africans go to West Africa, the Congo, to Niger, and they also go to Egypt. So it comes from the parent people, and the ancient Egyptians remembered this. And so that's how it gets to West Africa, from a culture before ancient Egypt. I'll stop. Thank you.
Oh no, 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 no. This is See, this is what true learning is all about. Wow, that was really deep, Brother Reggie. And I would please really like at some point to talk with you and get those correspondence down, because it makes it deepens it, and that's what we have to do. Because what you just did with the connection with the Sankofa and what you did with the Mother Spirit, we back away from that, and we can't. It was like when I was doing and we're gonna and I guess I'm coming back next week, because next week I'm going to be talking about the YouTube channel that I did in order to use ancient wisdoms and contemporary times. But one of the episodes was I was looking at iron and iron making, and I didn't realize and I remembered that when I was in the Cameroon, I saw these pictures of the very beginning of iron working, and the furnace to make iron was basically replicated the womb. So they used the woman's womb as the shape for the shape for the furnace. But before they built any new furnace, they would dig a hole in the ground, and they would put fertility. They would put birthing herbs in it. They would put all of those herbs that a woman would use when she was about to give birth in the bottom of the ground, and then they would put the iron thing in it, in the place. So even at the very beginning of our industrial civilization, we have the female principle as being the one of the originating things. So I thank you. I thank you for that explanation of the temple, and I thank you for the explanation of Sankofa, and I thank you for Heka, and I thank you for your years of deep scholarship and your study of the language. You have been unrelenting.
Well, I thank you. And I think our focus, if we are really going to repair, reconstruct African civilization, is to understand this deep well, and to understand that the Africans of the Nile, they created what you call Genesis cultures. Genesis, we spend too much time thinking about classical civilization, like with Black Athena and things like that, where Europeans try to look at uh, the relationships between black people and civilizations and what classical civilizations are. Civilizations are composed of what you call Genesis cultures. Genesis cultures are all in Africa: the funerary, the writing, the God concepts, right? The science, the mathematics. And all these civilizations do is capture these Genesis cultures, right? And the stories are in Africa, right? These concepts, and they have captured it, and they call themselves classical civilizations. But all they did was stole and borrowed African culture. And African culture, from its earliest point, from the cave paintings in the Green Sahara, and the paintings in the rock paintings in South Africa, all relate to the women. So our like Dr. Jacob Carruthers says, our spatial focus is wrong. Men only support Mott. We support Mott, right? We defend Mott. That is our job, to defend the women who are the progenitors our of who we are, and that is our only job. Our job is not to have hegemony over women. That is the European way. So the Kandakis in Nubia, uh, after Egypt fell, the Africans went back into Nubia, and their rulers were women. Hatshepsut, you hear all these T's, foremost of the foremost of the women, foremost of the great women, Hatshepsut, great women, right? We can't restore our civilization if we don't let women help and sometimes advise and sometimes rule. Men are there to support, but the creativeness is inspired from finds a woman for the African. And that is the difference between our culture and the European cultures. And again, I thank Dr. Joye Hardiman for re-supporting people like myself and other young independent, I'm not young anymore, independent scholars, because there is this hegemony even amongst our own people that if you get a European PhD, until you get that, you're really nothing. And Dr. Joye Hardiman and Sister Latrella and a lot of the women, Rosalind Jeffries and a lot, Dr. Ricchetti, they didn't do that. They used independent scholars as helpers. So thank you again, Dua.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Dr. Joye, if
You
I
are
may
so.
ask.
Yes.
I was going to ask, so we're learning upon the importance of, this ancient Kemetic wisdom. How do we connect it? A lot, especially maybe as a younger person, how a lot of times we need connection. And so how do we take the importance of this wisdom, make it applicable to today? And how do we make sure that these principles and this knowledge, this wisdom lives on? How do we carry that forward?
Excellent question. Excellent question, Brittany. We carry our ancestors told us that we had to speak Mott, do Mott, act Mott, walk in Mott, and they also told us that it is not whether or not it's not whether or not we're successful all the time. What's important is our intention. All right, our intention to incorporate these things. Sometimes we mess up, and sometimes we, because you can't have that much. You can't have 4 centuries of history without messing up sometime. And so so I think it's like a river. You jump in wherever you can. For me, I do it by I take certain principles and I try to live in those principles. Like I try to live in both and. I try to when I find myself doing hierarchies, when I find myself doing binaries, I honor my thought. I have a process I call image, re-image, shift the premise. Image means figure out what the image is, see if it's a good one or a bad one. If it's a bad one, then you shift it. You shift it. We can shift it linguistically. We can shift it, when we find ourselves doing things like mothers calling their kids, "Come here, you little monkey." We got to shift that. That's a negative programming, and it's a programming that we have one because we were told we were monkeys, and we have the programming because of something like the Willie Lynch syndrome. We don't want people to know that our little monkey is really, really brilliant. So we say we put our kids down so they don't get sold. That's still in the genetic memory. I don't want to say I got a really smart kid because then that kid may be sold or that kid may be killed, like Emmett Till, who was still smart. So we have to understand that we have these things inside of us, and we have to practice every day to try to look at them, to try to say, am I walking in my divine self, or am I stuck in, am I in my divine self, or am I walking in my little small petty self? And even just as simple as looking at our body movements and finding out what activities and stuff like that make us shrink. And then what activities make our shoulders go back and our heads up. Those are ancestral kind of things that we have to listen to. So it's really like, it's like really trying to live it, trying to practice the Nguba Saba, like self-determination is another way we get back into our ancient, our ancient ways of being. And study. And if you can, learn the language. Even if you don't speak it, just be able to recognize it and understand. When we see the way some of the meta nature is put together, we understand both and. We understand the notion of not only both and, but both and beyond, because there's some language constructions that talk about not just 1, 2, but also talk about 3 in the way it's constructed, if that makes any sense. So really, it's study, research, talk to other people, and just live it. Just live it. Just say, am I walking in the way of the master, or am I walking in the way of my ancestors? Am I so hung up in the material that I've forgotten the relationship, because we're relationship people, you know. And so how do every day I know that it is my duty to walk in abundance. It is my duty to see, you know, to see the it's my duty it's my duty to see all the people who support me, as opposed to looking at the one person who doesn't. You know, I mean, just a little tiny story about how you walk in the way. I live in the Northwest, and in the Northwest, there's a lot of mixed marriages, and there's a lot of, you know, black men with white women everywhere, and so you kind of develop this mindset or this attitude. So I was complaining one day to my friend, and I said, to my mentor, I said, I walked by this black guy, and he didn't even say anything to me. He was with this white girl, and he just didn't say nothing to me. And I went ratty. And Maxine looked at me, and she said, because I was being European, but she said, looked at me, and she said, how'd you get to school today? I said, I got a ride with Stephen. She said, who's Stephen? I said, a black male. And she said, and right now, you know, you're carrying a child. You know, whose child are you carrying? Charles's. Who's Charles? A black man. And where are you going after class today? I'm going to the Caballeros. Why? Because Mr. Jones wants me to eat greens because I'm pregnant. And he says after class every day, he wants me to eat greens, and he's not going to cook them with pork so the baby can be healthy. And by the time she went through this litany, and I saw all these men who were supporting me, but I had gotten hung up in this one and hadn't seen the many. That's the kind of thing we have to practice. That's the kind of thing we have to see ourselves doing, realizing that we're operating from Mr. Charlie's trick bag and say, no, you know, that's not, you know, what's my reality? My reality, as Brother Reggie says, it's a complementary thing. There's a relationship of support and defense, you know, and how to appreciate that. How do we appreciate the 9 good black men and not get all hung up on the one that done us wrong? You know, so that's how we incorporate the ways of our ancestors. And we do it through rituals, and we do it through ceremonies, and we do it through saying their, just libations. Even if you woke up every morning and did a small libation to somebody, some ancestor, either known or unknown, that allowed you even to be able to be in a place where you could wake up. Just that little thing of saying the name. Every time I say Hatshepsut's name, I bring her spirit back into the universe. And when I bring the spirit back, because when she said, I'm going to restore that which is in ruin, she wasn't talking about contemporary times. She was talking about past times. But she was saying things were in ruin, and they will not be in ruin but they will not be in ruin during my time. You know, during my time, I'm going to build monuments to talk about the ancestors. I'm going to do that. So if I call her spirit, then I can, you know, then that's how we get it back, with intentionality, with language, with study, and with conversation. You know, with conversation. So and to be open to new ideas and open to growth. You know, I mean, it's in our heads and in our spirits. It's in our ka, you know. So I don't know if that's an answer.
It is. Thank you so much. I've taken notes with the many.
Oh, okay, me too. I've been taking notes all the time as well. Right, because that's who we are. That's who we are. The word for literature in Kemet was teaching. You know, it's about teaching and learning. It's about being lifelong learning.
Yes, and I agree to that. When the ancestors come to me, they made it simple. They told me to walk as I learn and learn as I walk. Now, with that understanding, to walk as I learn, what am I learning of? Because the ancestors didn't send me to what they call scholars. The ancestors actually speak through my mouth, and then I hear what it is that they're saying, and then I'm learning from a perspective of the ancient of days, and then I will come across confirmations among scholars or those who had covered the information that is being revealed to me. The thing that one of the things, well, many of the things that the Spirit has revealed to me, I do I understand that we can't put so much emphasis on titles because our gifts are within. And when you put a title on individuals, they're more looked at as the absolute truth. But a same person that's in a village that has wisdom because of the lifestyle and the cultures and the experiences that they're living because they're in tune with Mother Nature and the cosmos and just the wisdom of the elders. They have not been to our academic schools. They have the ability of the divine brilliance within their mind because of the desires of their heart to be in alignment as the gatekeepers of wisdom and of nature to actually get a free download of re-establishing. And I say re because when we utilize Sankofa, it is to actually go back and retrieve something that we had before that we have actually lost. And it's now time to reestablish and to actually apply it because the knowledge that is being awakened in us is very significant and relevant. And it is an absolute what we would call it's necessary. So we can't overlook the person who might not have received the teachings based on an educational system of a people who has exploited us, demise us, and mistreat us and control the narrative. So I give thanks to you, and it sounds like Brother Reggie, who have actually returned to the wisdom and the knowledge of our ancestors. But I can sit down at a table of any scholar and the spirit of the ancestors speak through me, not only speaking to them, but teaching me at the same time the office of what it is that I was sent here and mandated to do. So I just wanted to put that there because when you're walking to fulfill the steps of the left foot forward of our ancestors, they already have the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding. And if that bloodline is within us, it can automatically be manifested in such a time as this. And with that, I'm complete.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. And when you talk, it makes me think about. I was hearing you talk, and the word roots coming up. And I think about how when we were growing up, I was growing up. We kind of poo-pooed the root wisdom of our grandmothers or grandfathers that Western education made us think that people who collected roots and things like that were just country folk who didn't know what they were doing, when in fact they were alchemists and they were botanists and they were complete scientists and stuff like that. But but when integration came, and I think for me integration was the third Mayatha. That when integration came and we got cut off from our communities and sent into other communities that called what we did in our community's country and called it ignorant and made us not like the root workers. I mean, just think about that. We cut ourselves off from the root workers, not just the plant root workers, but the root workers. I mean, that metaphor is really, really, really symbolic. And so that's why we have to get back to our root people. But we can't go back the same way because things are different. Like that story was told differently depending on a historical situation. We're in another historical situation. So that's why I say we have to turn, not return, because we have to go back to our ancestral roots and spiral them up. And then, and so I hear you, and I think it's and I thank you for those thoughts because we have to get back to our root wisdom in terms of how we live our lives and our root wisdom in terms of our ancestors. We got to get back to our roots in more than just a skip gates kind of way.
I want to add, um, uh, one of the things is that one of the ancient Africans understood about sovereignty, and so sovereignty for them is the Nosut Biti. The Nosut Biti is the ruler. The ruler could be women or men, and they had also established a method, and that method is called a method of thinking, and that method is called the Tepesep.
Can't really hear you, Reggie. Can you talk a little louder?
Okay, I put the speaker on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
that's better.
Okay, so I'll speak up because I have the headphones.
Earphones, right.
The ancient Africans created a concept of the Nosut Biti. The Nosut Biti is sovereignty, right? And they created a method of thinking called the Tep Heseb. The Tep Heseb is the correct method. I have a European education. I have a degree in computer science from the School of Engineering at City College. I also have an honors award from the Department of Black Studies under Dr. Leonard Jeffries, right? I've been able to mesh the both of them. Like Dr. Joye Hardiman, she has an earned PhD, right? And she also brings from the deep well. The problem is that we are at war. Our individual spirituality is not going to bring us to victory. What is going to bring us to victory is organizing ourselves in our communities. I I go back and forth with a lot of people who talk about spirituality. Everybody has their own ka and their ba and their ren, things, those aspects. But it's nothing unless the community has the ba and the ka, right? And the ren. It means nothing at all. There are a lot of people who will walk around with their own spirituality, but they can't read the Meta Neter. They can walk up to some of the most profound pieces of intellectual thought, and they can't read any of it. So one thing that we have to do is we have to follow a tepesep, and a correct method, and that correct method has to follow itself in the community as we become teachers and stuff. But I reject the notion that a person, an individual spirituality, is more important than the group spirituality and the concept of sovereignty. We are losing because the Europeans are hell bent and organized as a group against us. And yes, there are great minds and great insights that come from individual people, but you must struggle and prove to your people that what you're saying is right, and it adds to our liberation movement, and it's just not your own individual thoughts. I'll stop.
Both and. Both and. Absolutely. Absolutely. Mr. Brown.
Joy, I wanted to ask you because I'm seeing things around me all the time, and I've had what they call these space cadet experiences myself, and having been able to travel to so many countries in Africa, and experience, my guidance coming directly from nature itself, because I've been in situations where I just had to depend on my ancestors to guide me through nature. So I wanted to ask you, and especially with some of the young babies, young people that come in, do you think our ancestors return through us? And sometimes they just come here knowing. I mean, I'm not against going to these institutions of what they call higher learning, but those institutions sometimes may kill your in what the ancestors will speak through you and how they'll use you. I think again, Reggie, you're correct when you talk about both, but at the same time, things are happening right now in this on the planet where the energy is is coming through from our ancestors that some of it is just new, and we have to be open to it. And of course, we have to sift the things so that we do drink of deep water and not muddy, cloudy water that leads us into the wrong way. But I wanted Sister Hardy to speak on that. And I would like for Sister Moshe also to give her insight on that. But first, Sister Hardy, Joy.
If I understand you correctly, what you're asking about is the relation. I'm getting two things. Is that is the question? What do I think about ancestral presence in nature, in the universe, and the lessons that are coming with that, or is that with? Am I understanding the question correctly?
Yeah, children who are born,
Yes.
being born today,
Yes.
with a consciousness
Yes.
that it could only be coming from the ancestors,
Yes.
renewing themselves through the children with
Yes.
that kind of consciousness. Of course,
Yes.
you know, you got to learn, you got to be committed, but a lot of the education that the Europeans teach us is through and through to keep us diminished and under their control. So you have to be open to both sides of your consciousness and understand how to sift the truth from the brainwashing and the mechanism of control, because the system is set up to control us.
Exactly.
The educational system especially.
Oh, especially. No. In answer to all your questions, yes, I emphatically believe in reincarnation. I emphatically believe that that there are children who are born who are very, very old spirits, and you can tell it from the moment they, that they come into the world. Sometimes you can even tell it when they're not in the world yet, when they're still in the womb. But there's definitely some people who have been here before, and are coming back in order to finish some unfinished business. I believe that. I believe that because I also believe that energy, that spirit is in everything, and so spirit would also be in nature, and a nature, and a tree might even be a spirit coming back, because it has a purpose or a destination. So I totally believe that, and I totally believe that our ancestors have conversations with us, whether or not we have degrees or not. We know, of course, that the education has ever since it was created by Western societies, or ever since it was co-opted by Western society, has been designed to raise white supremacy and to make everything else reduced. It is no small significant that after the Haitian Revolution, when France and America and England and Portuguese and all the European nations decided that they were going to bring Haiti to its knees and never let it come above ground ever again if they could help it. The first thing that happened was the Catholics came in, the Pope came in and said, "I'll give you aid, but I must have control over your education system." And so, because the aid was needed, the Catholics came in and they basically preached the doctrine that the Haitians had sold their souls to the devil in order to win. And that's why they were being cursed for all of mankind. Again, the notion of generational trauma, as opposed to the notion of Haiti's poor because you took everything. You took the trees, you cut down the mahogany, you came in and took the treasury and used it took it to the U.S. and started Citibank with it. You killed the pigs that were the common people's currency, because you said that there was swine flu and the pigs from Haiti would fly over to swim over to Texas, so you had to kill every single pig. We don't say that's the reason for the poverty, but because the education system that they imposed does not even allow that to be a consideration. So yeah, education has been very bad, and that's why we must educate our children. particularly these old souls that are coming back in. We not educate them, but we not educate them, but we may, allow for. We have to teach we have to tell our story. We have to teach our story, and we have to listen when the ancestors speak to us. I'm just going to tell you one little tiny story because I think it's an important story. I had gone to Cape Coast with Dr. J, with Dr. Jeffries, a long time ago when he was doing those tours, and I had gone and I was working in my Western intellectual PhD head, and I had gone to feel the pain. I wanted to feel the anguish. I wanted to go into those castles and those dungeons, and I wanted to feel what my ancestors had felt. I wanted to hear the cries. I wanted to imagine it. And I went to where they keep all the rebellious people because I figured I would be there. And I sat there and I felt nothing. I tried to do my Stanislavski, imagining the emotion, and nothing. I went to the door of no return with my Western intellectual self, and I stood in the door of no return, and I was waiting to be overcome, and nothing happened. And so then when we were leaving, I went to the edge of the boat, and I said, okay, I need to feel what my ancestors felt. And I felt nothing. And then I turned around. I ran smack into one of those steel bulkheads, cement bulkheads that they use to tie up the rope. I fell on the deck thing. I gashed my leg open. It was bleeding. And I heard the ancestors say, pain, pain. You want to feel pain? We'll give you pain. And what I realized at that moment, and that was a critical turning point, was that I was coming with the wrong attitude. I was coming with the wrong wisdom. I was coming with my head and not my heart. I was not coming with the roots. And that what I should have been doing is I should have gotten off that boat and stood in the middle of the courtyard and say, I came here because some of us made it. I want you to know, some of us made it. Some of us were able to survive the Middle Passage. Some of us were able to live through enslavement, live through Jim Crow, live through not being able to read and write. And some of us got PhDs that we're going to use in your service. And you can sleep tonight, ancestors. You can rest tonight. That was the attitude I was supposed to come with. And that changed my life at that point. Because that's when I stopped operating from the deficit. And because the ancestors demanded that I operate in the assets all the time. And when I didn't, they would do bad things to me. Because the ancestors, they love you, but they can draw blood. I mean, I still have the scar on my leg. You know, and I look down there. Ancestors don't play. And that's the whole thing that we have to understand. And another time I'll tell you when they threw me down an anthill. And because I had a little arrogance. I was doing a libation in Cameroon, and I was kind of maybe getting a little. I didn't ask permission to do the libation or anything. I went to the gravesite. I did the libation. I thought I was all that. Turned around, was starting to walk. I was in Bimbia. Back up to the road. It was about a mile to walk up to the road, and two red ants bit me, and I was like, oh, ooh, red ants, that hurt. And then somebody said, oh, there's some more anthills. And I jumped and I fell into an anthill. The ancestor pushed me into an anthill because I came with the wrong attitude, you know, and I busted my lip and I busted my head and I had all these ants crawling all over me. And luckily they were black ants, not the red ones. But I had all these ants crawling, and I had to throw off all my clothes. I had to throw off my clothes, and people trying to throw water on me and get the ants off of me. And I had to walk back 1 mile barefoot because my shoes had gotten thrown off someplace. This one woman had a little shirt she gave me. I think she was a size 2, and I am a size 16. You know, so it didn't cover nothing. And I had a little scarf that was trying to wrap around me. And here I'm bleeding and I'm dripping. And it was like the ancestor said, you're going to go out of here the way we came in. And wow, yeah. So I don't play with the ancestors. You know, I don't play with it. It's not a game for me because they're very serious. They have a task. They want their due. They want to come. They want their due. They want their respect. and they want their place in the world again. And so,
Minister Brown, are you there? Dr. Hardiman,
yes,
are you there?
yes.
I think Minister Brown is muted. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you're back.
Okay.
When you give me a chance, Mr. Brown, I have a question. Give me a
After
chance.
Moshe. After Moshe. Go ahead, Moshe. Yeah. Are you there, Sister Moshe? Can you unmute?
Yes, yeah. Somebody
Right.
muted my mic. But
Okay.
I'm here, Donnie Brown.
Yeah.
So I wanted to you wanted me to pick up where Mama Joy left off.
Yeah. No. Were you listening? Because if you were not listening, I would go on.
Yes, I was listening. You wanted me to contribute to believing in reincarnation.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so yes, I am a witness and I am evidence of the reincarnation of the lineage of the, I guess you would call them the messengers, or like in Swahili, Jumbe, the ones who are not appointed by man, or neither are they sent here to man. They were divinely appointed by the ancestors and the cosmic mother, to be a vessel of their voices, of their intentions, and for their divine purpose to uproot the injustice, to overthrow the hypocrisy, to cast out the religious indoctrination, and to reestablish the order of Ma'at. Now, everyone is assigned a specific office, and everything that they have experienced up until the time of their acknowledgement of recognizing their position in the midst of other positions. They are, well, I can speak for myself. The ancestors told me, I'm not here to be validated by any man or woman, institution, religion, political endeavors, or anything of that. When I was living the way I was living, and I wasn't looking for no God, I wasn't thinking about no God, and I definitely wasn't requesting no God. What I would now say is spirit guides to come into my life, where I felt like I was content where I was with all the things I was experiencing. But these ancestors and the divine spirit come to me and let me know I'm a sequel of a remnant that is being awakened, and they are the ones who lead and guide me. And they are the ones who go before me, yeah, to lead me. They're beside me to guide me. They're behind me to protect me. They're over me to cover me. They're even beneath me to carry me. But most importantly, they have empowered me within me to do what they have called, chosen, and mandated me to do. Now, with this understanding that we are being awakened to fulfill the office that we're the originators to awaken to expose the falsified duplicators, we need to be focused on that gift that was given to us to contribute to recognize if you are part of the remnant to establish the order of what we have been strategically has been taken from us, but we're awakening with the divine consciousness to establish the order. Whether you want to say Re or Ra. Now, my concept of Ra is still when you define something, when you have to go back and reestablish it to make it put back in its order. We can say we can go back and then to put in order. Now, this gift of being able to be used by the divine, we have to realize that in every village where every divine civilization and community and communication begins, there's elders, and then there's the ones who are mid adults. You have your young youth, and you have your childrens, and you have your babies. Now, a baby can be a teacher as well as a student, as well as the elder can be a student as well as a teacher. It all depends on the circumstances of collaboration, of being able to see the needs that needs to be fulfilled. And what we have come accustomed to when we look for a community acceptance, we fail simply because so many have a viewpoint of what that is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to sound like, what it's supposed to walk like, and how it's supposed to contribute to uplift others, instead of acknowledging that we have spent so much time in building our own houses that we forget about building the house of the divine. So I am only sent here to be a vessel, a mouthpiece, a hand, a mindset, because even though I speak in English, I read in English, my thoughts is of the ancient of ancestors' thoughts. And as far as reading Medunetter is concerned, pictograph is explained to me in quite good um, in very good depth. I never knew anything about Metu Neter. The ancestors just simply started showing me the pictographs of the Ancient of Days and taught me that way. So I can actually read it, but it's not necessary for me to actually draw it when I'm here to fulfill it in sincerity, spirit, and in truth. Because it has to come a time when you actually take what it is that you read, just like we tell the false prophets and the false preachers and teachers to practice what it is that you preach. Now we living in this time because we are at war right now, that we don't really have time to be sitting and comparing scholarship when we are the manifestation of taking the word and making it alive. And we are to be walking with divine consciousness, and we are to apply it so we can multiply it. And just as well as the ancestors had let us know, even as Reggie can believe and confirm, that is divine order of strategic planning, because of wisdom is a divine feminine, or what we call a she. We have lived up under this patriarchal dominant male sodomite society for long enough, and she is ready to reclaim her throne and her sagacity and her divine audacity, to make this happen with agreement or without agreement. Because if it only take one to bring this type of chaos into the world, it can only have to really take one to take it out. And I make myself available for the divine spirit to do whatever is necessary at such a time as this, for me to do forth, bring forth my contribution, and that to be the cornerstone of a puzzle with four corners. And I'm looking forward to those who have ears to hear, be able to hear and understand, and those who have eyes to see, be able to see and perceive, with a heart that is humble enough to be open as a child that is going to lead this nation into what it is that we have to reestablish, the divine order, because that inner child is very important. Because as a woman, I have a trinity, a divine trinity. I have the divine lady, I have the divine lioness, and I have the divine inner child, that the daughter, that the lioness has to protect the lady as well as the lioness. I mean the inner child. And whatever the teaching is, when I do it out of respect to the ancestors, to never be questioned, simply because we are all working for the same order to get out of the situations that we're in. But if you overlook one masculine because you don't want to deal with the feminine, and if you overlook the feminine because you just want to deal with the masculine, we are dwelling, we're going up a hill that is a slippery slope because it takes both of us in order to be in compliance with one another, in order to establish what it is that needs to be done. And I am a messenger, so I speak on behalf of what they tell me to speak, and I do what they tell me to do. And I'm not always in compliance because they always do ask you in a situation that's not comfortable for you. But then that's when you really know that you're being guided by the spirit, because they don't ask your permission, they take it, because this is what time it is. And with that, I'm complete.
Rundy, my brother Rundy.
How you How you doing?
I'm fine. Sister Joy, Rundy is gonna ask the last question and give you all the time you need to answer to take us out of here, because we're gonna be back with you next week. So I want everybody to subscribe to Transatlantic Productions, hit the bell so that we can notify you that we every time we have these programs are very critical. These are critical times, and we need people like Joy and Reggie and Sister Moshe and Sister Brittany. We need us to have this dialogue. And I'm 82 years old. I've been all around Europe, Africa, all over, and I've contributed, but I'm indebted to my people, and I'm not afraid, to speak up with any and all of you. I'll give you my experience. I don't know it all. I'm still trying to learn. That's why Joy is on this program. That's why I have any and all of you on this program, so that we can converse, we can exchange, we can learn, we can teach each other. We are a deep people. And once we understand who we are and the history that we are all trying to, bring to each other, that we can really win this war. Hey, we can do it. Rundy?
First of all, Dr. Joye Hardiman, and to especially my brother Reggie, I'll call you Dr. Reggie for now, and to Minister Clemson Brown and all the other guests. It's an honor to be here. I just came from Jamaica, from the Marcus Garvey Liberty Hall, a physical location in Jamaica. The question I have, and the respect I have for your presentation, the pictorial, the battle between falsehood and truth, those slides that you showed are very impactful. Your story, your book, I don't know if you have a copy of the book to show us, but what you've done today, for me personally, coming back from Jamaica and spiritually or ancestrally being invited in this conversation, Minister Brown called on me. I find this to be one of the greatest honor to have Dr. Reggie on the line, and Dr. Joy, and Mama Moshe, and this lady Van, and Minister Brown. We've been working on Tapvideo for the past 5 years.
Listen, her name is
Brittany Van. It's cut off at the end.
Van Zant.
Van's okay. So the key takeaway here is practicality, planning. The word I've documented here: divine consciousness, war, and kind of getting us moving forward. I'm a practical Garveyite, and there are a lot of practical and spiritual people here. We all have to have a practical and a spiritual balance, right? And sometimes individually, we kind of go beyond in the spiritual because of our inability to actually get something done in reality. Your presentation with the struggle, I watched those slides, on all the documentation that are already available for our children. The question for you is, in restoring Ma'at, which is one of my purpose for doing this work with Mr. Brown, I spent 5 years digitizing this content. The reason why we're having this show is partly because we spent 5 years to digitize this content, which is something physical and practical. When I met Mr. Brown, the goal is to get something done. I have my own spiritual system. We dance around fires in Jamaica. I'm a Maroon. I'm coming from a place of Garvey I'm coming to a place of nanny. I grew up in Maroon Town, Charlestown, nanny. These are my brothers. So coming here to have this meeting is a very important one. And I stand on the side of spirituality, understanding the feminine, ma'at. I stand on all of that. Motherhood and femininity and what you bring to the table even today. Like Mr. Brown say, we all have a role. But the key word that's been happening here is the word war. It states that we are at war. Now, children are born every day, and we have documentations all around them that keep them in the mindset and confusion. And if the question I have for you is, where are we collectively? When you look at the map of Africa in Restore Ma'at, where are we in the documentation collectively are present to a child that could create this balance for them with all this material? I cannot transcend my spirituality to a child or my daughter. I have to have documentation for her. And the respect I have for you is that you're a PhD in the world of the academia and you are leaving books for us and you're participating in their system and you have the degree from the system, but you also have this ability to connect with the ancestors and you're fusing both together. And this is what I see from your work. You know, you have mastered both realms, which is very important. So the real question I have, since you've mastered both realms, where are we in the documentation, the practical documentation, step by step, like the Bible, to liberate our children and our people? We could all talk about the ancestors frivolously with exponential expression of our own personal experience and our own rights to do that. It's fine. But the word war simply means that we have to have weapons. Right now, collectively as a people, as a community, Marcus Garvey, the ship was his weapon. That was his weapon. He wasn't expressing his spirituality all the time. He had an answer. He had a practical, this is where we're going. So express for me the practical answers that we have now. Is there an institution? Is there a book? Is there a new Bible of Ma'at? I'm going to stop speaking and I hope you understand my question.
Thank you to you, BrotherRonn, for dancing with me through that slide tape presentation. That was really beautiful. How you would go to when I went go to my face because my face was telling the story, and then back to the slide. I really appreciate that. I also appreciate your calmness when I couldn't get in at the beginning of the program, and you just kind of you were just like, you were like my ringtone. The ringtone on my phone is easy like Sunday morning. And so that's what I got from you. I want to thank you for making my entry in the technology with today easy like Sunday morning. I am blessed by your presence. So
Respect, love, respect. Thank you.
Respect, totally. And two things come to me when I respond, when I hear your question. One, you said, what is our weapon? I think our weapon right now is technology. I think that that's the new weapon, and I think that our next generations are there. They have been preparing. They may not have known it was the ancestors or this or that, but they have been preparing and they are engaged. One of the things that my mentor, Dr. Mims, who is 93 right now, when I asked her what was the secret for longevity, she said she surrounded herself with young people. And I have sought to do that. I have sought to, on every project that I have been on, is to have somebody working on it with me that is at least 20 years younger than me, for the next gens. Because and that's where my hope comes. My strength comes from the ancestors. My passion comes from my purpose. But my hope comes from all of the young, and they call them in Seattle. They call themselves the unapologetic creatives. You know, I mean, the young people are so non-apologetic. I love it. I grew up in a generation where we said we were sorry all the time. We were sorry we woke up. We were sorry we went to bed. We were sorry we did this. We were sorry we did that. This next generation is not sorry for anything. They are unapologetic in their embracing of Blackness. I see amazing projects of young people who are doing documentation. They're doing it by film. They're doing it by spoken word. They're doing it. By political action. They're doing it by we have a community in Seattle called Africatown, and it's an Africatown land trust, and they've gone out and they've negotiated, and they've been working on housing and making sure that the elders and the low income are not kicked out of the community totally. They had a black street party, you know, a black family reunion of all the families from the hilltop, just honoring, from the Central District, honoring them. These were young people. These are young people who have radio stations. We have Salisbury. We have people here who run radio, young people who run a radio station that keeps everybody in tune with what's going on. And so when I see all these young people doing all these things, I have such hope. I have such hope. And as an elder who is 77, now I'm looking at you, Brittany, because I want your face to go, oh, 77? You don't look like you're 77 at all. But but as an elder who's 77, I am energized by what the young people are doing. And so I think it's both the ancestors on one side and the young people on the other side. That's our weapon. That's our weapon. And they are prepared. They're really good. Our job, I feel right now, as an elder, is to basically be present. You know, be present. Just be present, and to support, listen, and support. Because they have it. I really believe that, Brother Ron. I have such hope in the future from the documentation and the work that I have been seeing done by young people, both individually and, as Brother Reggie says, collectively. I've seen them struggle through how do we move from ego to we go. And I have faith. They light my light, and they take care of me. They make sure that I have a dehumidifier because the smog is everywhere. And I open the door and there's a young person holding a 3-foot high humidifier because they heard I didn't have one in the house and they wanted me to have healthy breathing. You know, and I look at scholars like Brother Reggie, longitudinal. I don't think our young people, and I know, Reggie, you're moving into, you're a warrior, you know, stuff like that, but you'll always be a young person to me. But I see them prepared. I see them ready to take on the battle. I see them trying to document, and I see them being in it for the long haul. And that's what I meant to say. It's not a sure. I'm not seeing a lot of sprinters out here. I'm seeing people who are prepared for long distance. And as a result, they're also doing something that I didn't do in my generation. They're taking care of themselves. They're thinking about self-care. They're thinking about, how do I do this for the long time? How do I digest my reality? And I'm using digest because somebody mentioned things about how we got the toxins out. We don't digest. We don't digest. We know we don't chew our food long enough. But the digestion system is amazing, because what it does is it removes the toxins, it takes out the toxins, and it helps us keep the nutrients. And I think that's what the period we are right now is, just making sure that the toxins get out of us and the nutrients come into this, because you're right. This is a war, and we're going to be lots of battles, and sometimes we may lose a battle. But historically, because we've been in this position before, we know what the outcome is. We are in an intermediate period, just like in Kemet, there were the intermediate periods below the periods of high civilization. And we know that we have that at least 3 times we were able to move out of the intermediate period, to move out of the chaos, and win. And win the hearts and minds and souls of our people, and go to high civilization. And we're at that point. We're in the age of Aquarius. The Chinese say that we're at this point. We're at this critical point in history. And if we just keep putting that wedge in, and the water, the way we did when we wanted to do bricks, we drilled holes and then we put water in them, and put wood in them. and then we put water over the wood so the wood would swell and the brick would be made. That's where we are right now. And I think I'm looking forward, you know, to the future, because I trust the young people who are reaching out their hand saying, "Give me the mantle, give us the mantle, and we'll bring this home." Yeah, that's it. That's the last one. We're like a relay. It feels like we're at a relay race, and now we're about to hand off the baton to the people who are going to bring it home. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Brother Ron, if I could just add just a few words to what Dr. Joye Hardiman said, to give you a pragmatic statement. Yes, we must continue the work of Garvey. Uh, Garvey and his descendants, like El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, who was a Garveyite. His father and mother were Garveyites. All of them lived before there was one black city. El Hajj Malik El Shabazz died in 1965. The first black city was in Cleveland under Mayor Stokes. Uh, what Garvey did was energize our communities at a time where we were not able to take power. Malcolm X was at the cutting, he was at the era where this was going to happen. After his death, we created black cities, meaning that we organized our local populations, as you said, to do action. And that action was to take power, that was to take governments. Cities are the foundations of great nations. Great nations start with their cities. In ancient Kemet, it started with the Sabbats. We have to now take power. When you take a city, you control the law, you control the police, you control the economics, you control the real estate. You do de facto, you have de facto reparations for your population because you're elected because of the majority population. Even if there are other people in your community that are not like you, you become good stewards of power. The fact of the matter is our leaders who we elect have largely been the wrong leaders. They want to contribute to the system that's suppressing us instead of contribute directly to the people that got them elected. The loophole in America and this big fight, this civil war, is about that the African and others can now, by their majority populations, take power and create laws. And so that's why I'm into the collective. I'm not into the individual. I'm not into the individual spirituality. I'm not into that. I'm into power. Power, as Dr. Wade Noble says, is the ability to define your reality and have other people respond to your reality as if it was their own. Until we use Garvey's concepts and methods and the voice of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz and others to take power and control the laws that are controlling us, we will always be in a situation of individual ants being stomped on. So thank you so much, Brother Ron, for asking a question on pragmatics. Where do we take this? Dr. Joye Hardiman, she could be a mayor. Our leaders need to stop doing what they're doing, and if they want to be leaders, take power, find the people who they want to put in power. Once they're in, we can create laws. Laws is what creates sovereignty for us. And Garvey and Garvey's predecessors, they knew this. Now it's for our generation to fulfill it or betray it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Reggie. Thank you so much. Thank you, Minister Brown. Thank you, Doctor, and everyone. Thanks so much.
Brothers and sisters, we'll be back next week, next Saturday, the 18th, 3 p.m. Tell your friends, email the link, get everybody involved. Let's go. Thank you again. I appreciate you, Dr. Hardiman. I really appreciate you. Reggie, Sister Moshe, Ron, you did a fantastic job. I thank you. Sister Brittany, I'm not forgetting about you. I'm looking right at you with your beautiful self. And we look forward to being together, family. One of the things I just want to end with is that we just got to learn how to love each other. And on my block, there, within the last 3 weeks, there have been 2 shootings, one right directly in front of my house, 20 shots. And this is our young people killing each other, firing at each other. We got to learn how to love each other. So with that, until next week, thank you and good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Hotep. Hotep.
Hotep.
Oh, damn.